The ship on Noor-Haddad's screen had been dead for 212 years. It was decelerating beautifully. Noor worked the night console at Earth Approach Control, the orbital traffic authority that managed everything from freighters to research probes. At 3 in the morning, station time, the deep arrays flagged a mass entering the system. The transponder code it broadcast made her set down her tea very slowly. UNS Promise, humanity's first colony ship, launched 212 years ago with 900 souls aboard, bound for a survey world 11 light-years out and lost silently somewhere past the heliopause. No wreckage, no signal. The Promise had become the ghost story of the space age, the cautionary tale that set colonization back a century. Every child learned the name, every spacer knew the toast, to the Promise still out there. It was still out there. It was coming home on a flawless approach vector, its ancient fusion torch burning cleaner than its original engineers had ever managed. And it was not alone. The escort resolved over the following hour, and Noor called the duty officer, and the duty officer called the Admiralty, and by dawn the whole planet was awake. 3,000 ships surrounded the Promise. Warships unmistakably black as anthracite, flying a formation no human fleet had ever flown. Layered rings, angled like the petals of a closing flower, with the old colony ship carried at the heart. Every defense installation went to alert. Analysts fought over the imagery. A trophy, said some. A Trojan horse, said others. Our ship crewed by something else, said the worst. At 06:14, the convoy transmitted. One voice in clear, archaic, perfect English learned it would turn out from a very specific library. Earth Approach, this is the convoy of the vessel Promise, requesting clearance and instruction. We have the honor to be escorting your people home. Please advise the Harbourmaster. This vessel's voyage is not complete until it reaches its port of registry. They asked for no government, no military. By the customs of whoever they were, arrival was a matter for one authority only. They asked for the port, which meant at 6:03 on an ordinary morning they were asking for Noor-Haddad. By the second day, Noor-Haddad was the most listened-to voice in human history, and she had not left the approach control deck in 30 hours. The convoy would speak only to her console, not to the Secretary General's channel, not to the Admiralty, not to the scientists. Each attempt was acknowledged with courteous bafflement and referred back to Earth Approach. Whoever the escorts were, their protocol was absolute. A vessel completing a voyage speaks to the harbor and only the harbor until it is berthed. Governments raged. The Admiralty positioned every warship Earth possessed, 41 hulls against 3,000. Nobody said that number out loud on any channel. So Noor talked to them. It was, she said later, like speaking with a cathedral. The voice never hurried, never varied, and answered everything except what everyone wanted to know. Facts emerged in careful order. The escorts called themselves a name the translators rendered as the Ferrymen. They had found the Promise 140 years ago, adrift, far off course in the deep dark between stars. They had spent the time since on restoration and transit, all of it. And the Promise's people, the voice confirmed, were aboard. All 900. All 900, the voice said, and something in its phrasing made Noor's hands go still on the console, and also the 12. The 900 and the 12 are aboard. All are prepared. We ask the harbor's patience. The manifest belongs to the ship, and the ship will speak it at birth. It is not ours to tell. Prepared, the word did its work quietly. Somewhere in the second sleepless night, the analysts stopped writing survivors in their briefings and started writing remains, and the mood of the planet turned over like a season. The Promise was not being returned. It was being born. 3,000 warships. Noor stared at the formation on her display, black rings closing around the old gold hull like petals, like pallbearers, and she understood before any expert said it what she was looking at. It was not an escort, it was a cord edge, and it was 11 days from Earth. On the third day the trouble started, and it started as Noor had known it would with the defense grid. The stakes were stated plainly in closed sessions, whose minutes leaked within hours. 3,000 warships of unknown capability were inbound on a course that would carry them inside the orbit of the moon. The convoy declined with courteous immovability every requested course change, every holding orbit, every demand for boarding and inspection. The voyage, the voice explained each time, as if to a child it was fond of, ends at the port of registry. The promise was registered to Earth orbit, high anchorage. It would berth there. Ritual permitted no other course. And once, in a tone the analysts replayed several hundred times, the voice added, 3,000 ships have come very far to see this done correctly. Do not ask us to do it incorrectly so close to the end. The hardliners heard a threat. Nor, who had now spent 60 hours with that voice, heard something stranger and more frightening. She heard grief and duty, and the particular immovability of a pallbearer who will not be persuaded to drop the coffin because the family is arguing at the graveside. The grid commanders won the first policy round. The automated perimeter, humanity's outer defense lattice, would stay fully armed. If the convoy crossed the red line still refusing inspection, the engagement decision would already be made. The line sat 5 days ahead of the convoy's stately pace. Nor read the directive at 4 in the morning, did the arithmetic, and made the choice that made everything afterward possible. Not a grand choice, a professional one. She insisted on that distinction for the rest of her life. She opened her channel and asked the convoy the one question no ministry, in 3 days of demands, had thought to ask a funeral. Who were they, she asked? The 900. You've carried them 140 years. You must know them. Tell me about the people on my manifest. The channel was silent for 11 seconds, the longest pause the convoy had ever taken. Then the voice said, Harbourmaster, we hoped someone would ask, and the cathedral, for the first time, sounded glad. We will send you the school records first. The children explain the rest. What came through Noor-Haddad's console over the next 2 days was the archive of the promise, and it broke the planet's heart the way hearts need breaking. All at once, and together. The colony ship had not died in a catastrophe. Its drive had failed, quietly and unfixably, in the void between stars, leaving life support whole and 900 people falling forever short of everywhere. They had understood completely within the first year. No rescue was possible. No landfall would come. The promise would be their whole world for exactly as long as its systems and their discipline lasted. What they did with that sentence is why the archive is now required reading in every school on Earth. They kept the school open. That decision, recorded in the captain's log in the second year, became the constitution of their small drifting nation. We cannot give our children a world, she wrote, but we can refuse to give them despair. The curriculum will continue, all of it, music included. Attendance mandatory. The universe has canceled our arrival. It has no authority over our conduct. 60 years, the archive showed. 2 full generations born in transit who would never stand on any world, raised without a single lie about their circumstances and without a single day of surrendered standards. They studied navigation for ships they would never steer. They performed plays. They held fierce elections for a government of 900, then 700, then 400, as the years and the recycler tolerances ground on. And they wrote, knowing exactly who the audience was, textbooks, observations, 60 years of meticulous science about deep space, addressed in careful hands to the descendants of Earth, whom we will not meet. The last log entry was made by the ship's final teacher, 19 years old, alone. She catalogued the library, she shut down each section with a small written ceremony, and she set the beacon she no longer had power to broadcast, the one the ferrymen would find 80 years later, with its one-line message that every human alive has now read. Whoever finds us, we finished our voyage. It just wasn't the one on the ticket. Please carry our homework the rest of the way. Noor-Haddad put the last page down in the middle of the 4th night. She looked at the defense grid status light burning armed on her board. And she began, very quietly, to be angry. On the 5th day, Noor took the archive public. All of it unabridged, released through the Approach Authority's public feed, under a harbourmaster's ancient and never-appealed duty to publish the manifests of arriving vessels. She did not ask permission. She had stopped believing permission was coming. The red line was 3 days out. The school records went first, as the convoy had suggested, and the convoy had been right. The children explained the rest. Earth met the promise's people not as 900 remains in a returning hull, but as faces in class photographs. Essay writers, terrible teenage poets. A boy who built a telescope from salvage to watch the stars his ship was failing to reach. A girl whose recorded flute recital. performed in the hydroponics bay for the acoustics in the year the water rationing began, became within a day the most played piece of music on the planet. The anger Nor had felt at her console arrived on schedule planet-wide. It was not aimed where the hardliners had aimed. Vigils appeared in 40 countries, then 400 cities, then everywhere. Candles, ship models, children's flutes. And the crowd's question became the question of the whole species, put with increasing heat to every government at once. These people kept school open for 60 years in the dark, and strangers carried them home for 140 more. Explain the armed perimeter. Explain it in those exact terms. No government managed it, but the directive held anyway, propped up by the honest, unshameable core of the military argument. 3,000 unknown warships, no inspection, hope is not a defense posture. The grid stayed armed. The convoy, informed nightly by Nor with the candor that had become the channel's custom, absorbed each report with the same reply, patient as tide. We will not alter the cord edge. We are almost there. They are almost home. 2 days, then 1. And at 3 in the morning of the 6th day, alone with the voice on the night channel, Nor finally asked about the one thing it had held back. The 12, she said. 912, you told me. My manifest says 900. Who are the 12? The pause this time was long even by cathedral standards. Harbourmaster, the voice said at last, that is the ships to tell at birth. But I will tell you what I am permitted. The 12 are ours, and they are the reason there are 3,000 of us. The convoy reached the red line at noon, universal time on the 8th day, with the perimeter armed and the engagement decision, by standing directive already made. What unmade it was not an order. Every account agrees, and the tribunals spent months confirming it. What unmade it was a transmission from the promise itself. The old ship had been silent all approach, a born thing spoken for by its bearers. At 11:51, 9 minutes from the line, its antique transmitter, restored like everything else to better than original, woke for the first time in 140 years, and began to broadcast on the emergency band every human receiver is built to hear. It broadcast the school, 60 years of morning assemblies, the daily ritual the archive had described, the whole ship's company reciting together the role of the original crew, then the births, then the log position, then the day's single line of purpose, written fresh each morning by whichever child had the duty. The promise played its mornings in sequence, decade after decade of drift. The voices changed as the years went by. Adults thinning, children rising, the roll of names growing longer and the reciting voices fewer, all the way down to the last year and the last voice. A 19-year-old teacher conducting assembly for an empty ship, reading every name from the beginning. 900 of them, steady as a bell. She finished with the day's line of purpose, which she had written herself, alone. The whole species heard it twice, because the perimeter's gun crews, like everyone else, had stopped moving. Today we keep the school open one more day. At 11:58, the officer commanding the perimeter grid, a woman whose name the tribunals officially declined to record, and whose statue now stands in 4 capitals under the simple title, the commander, gave the only order of her career that anyone remembers. 6 words into the general channel on her own authority, with the convoy 60 seconds from the line. All batteries stand down, school's coming home. The black petals crossed the red line into Earth's sky through a silence that was not the silence of weapons. It was the other kind. The kind you stand in at gravesides and gangways when something that was owed arrives at last to be paid. The promise, birthed at high anchorage on the 9th day, guided the final 1,000 kilometers by Nor Haddad's own voice reading the approach litany. The convoy had formally requested it. The harbourmaster brings the ship in. She held the syllables steady the way the last teacher had held the roll, and if her hands shook over the console, the channel never heard it. The old ship settled into the berth its builders had laid out 212 years before. The clamps closed, and the voice of the convoy said simply into the open channel, voyage complete. Log closed. Harbourmaster, the manifest is yours. The ship spoke it as promised at birth. The full manifest, self-read in the reconstructed voices of its own archive. 900 colonists, name by name, birth by birth, each with their years and their offices and their small recorded honors. The whole civic history of a drifting parish. And when the 900th had been spoken, the ship's voice changed out of the archive's human tones into the cathedral voice of the ferrymen and read 12 names more. 12 ferrymen. The manifest gave their years of service and their stations. Beneath the names, entered in the human style because they had asked for it, were 12 lines of record. They were the restorers. The first 12 who had boarded the derelict 140 years ago and begun the work, and who had, over the long decades of the transit, one by one, in the way of mortal crews on long voyages, died aboard her. Each line recorded the same request, made by each in their final days, and honored by their fleet at a cost no human had guessed. Having learned the 900, the manifest read, they asked to remain with the school. Their voyage became this voyage, birthed them with the ship's company. That was the secret of the escort's impossible size, nor understood it at her console in the same moment the planet did. Among the ferrymen, the manifest explained patiently, a chord edge is measured by one thing. How many of your own dead travel with the born? For one of their own, a squadron. For 12, everything that could be spared. 3,000 warships had crossed the dark not as a display of power, not even in the end only for us. They were burying their own people in our churchyard, with our dead, at their own dead's request. And they had brought the whole family. The funeral of the 912 was held over 3 days. It remains the only event in human history observed by the entire species at once, both fleets, and 2 faiths that had never previously met. The 900 came down in honored procession, to a memorial ground raised in sight of the sea, under stones carved with the role their own children had recited every morning for 60 years. The 12 ferrymen were laid among them, at the boundary rows, by their fleet's own custom, so that our people, the cathedral voice explained, will lie where the 2 rolls touch. 3,000 black ships held formation overhead throughout, and on the final evening, at the closing of the rites, they did the thing their custom does instead of gun salutes. Each ship released a single lantern, a point of steady golden light, engineered to hold orbit for a season. For that autumn and winter, the Earth wore a ring of 3,000 small lights, visible from every latitude at dusk, and the whole species walked around under them, looking up, being quiet. The promise itself was not scrapped, and not enshrined under glass. That debate lasted 1 week and was ended by a schoolteacher in Jakarta, whose petition gathered 400 million signatures in 2 days by proposing the only fitting thing. The school stays open. The old ship remains at high anchorage, restored, crewed, teaching. Every human child at some point in their education goes up to the promise, attends class in the actual schoolroom, sits morning assembly, and recites the roll. The final lesson is taught in the hydroponics bay with its famous acoustics. It consists of the 60 years of textbooks and observations the ship's company addressed to the descendants of Earth, whom we will not meet. Delivered at last. And still, the scientists confirm with continuing astonishment, full of discoveries. The homework, as instructed, was carried the rest of the way. It has been carried further since. Copies of the Promises library travel out on every human ship that leaves the system. Under a fleet regulation, nobody remembers proposing and everybody obeys. And on the anniversary of the birthing, every year, at 11:59 Universal Time, every transmitter humanity owns falls silent for 1 minute. Then every school on and off the Earth says the same line together, the last teacher's line, into the open channel, where it goes out at light speed forever to whoever finds it. Today, we keep the school open 1 more day. The question of payment was raised by humanity, not the ferrymen, in the weeks after the funeral. The raising of it taught Earth the last thing it needed to know about its visitors. 140 years of restoration, 3,000 ships across an interstellar gulf, the care of 900 dead, the gift of their archive, and the 12 lives their own fleet had spent on the work. Every human instinct said a debt that size must have a price. The fear that had built the perimeter grid asked its last nervous question in 100 wary editorials. What will they want? The ferrymen's answer, when the formal delegation finally asked, was translated with great care and released whole, because paraphrase felt like theft. You misunderstand the direction of the debt, the cathedral voice said. We are an old people. We do not make children anymore. Our voyages end one by one, and no young fleet rises behind us to carry us home when we drift. For 1,000 years we have finished the voyages of others, because unfinished voyages are the one grief our kind cannot bear. And because, in truth, it is how we practice. Practice for what? The delegation asked. For our own. Someday the last of our ships will fail in the dark as your promise failed, and there will be no ferrymen left to come for it. We had accepted this. Then we boarded your derelict, expecting only the dead and their silence, and we found 60 years of assembly rolls. We found a species that, falling forever short of everywhere, kept its school open and did its homework for descendants it would never meet. We spent 140 years in that library, learning your people by heart. We ask one payment. When our time comes, remember us the way the promise remembered you, before ever meeting you. That is all. That is everything. The treaty that followed is 4 sentences long, the shortest in human history, and the lawyers insist it is not technically a treaty at all. It is a mutual entry in 2 ships' logs. Humanity took up the practice within the decade. The first human ferry squadron, trained by the old fleet, flies now, black-hulled by choice, out along the drift lanes where the lost things are, finishing voyages. Its founding vessel, first of its class, was named by public vote, and no other name was ever really considered. The UNS Homework. Norhad had worked approach control for 30 more years and refused, with complete success, to become anything grander. Though the title she already had acquired in 2 languages, a weight it had never carried before. Harbourmaster. Among the ferrymen she learned it had always been a sacred word, the name of the one who stands at the end of voyages. After the promise came home, humanity quietly adopted the older meaning. Approach controllers are trained differently now. The syllabus includes the archive and the litany and one absolute rule, drafted by Nor herself in her last year of service. It hangs printed over every console in every tower and station in human space. Every arriving vessel is someone's promise. Answer accordingly. She was there, retired and gray, standing in the public gallery of her old deck, on the morning 41 years after the birthing, when the deep arrays flagged the signal everyone had always known would come. A ferryman ship, alone, ancient, drives failing far out in the drift, transmitting no distress because their kind never transmits distress. Only position and the log line that means the end among them. Voyage incomplete. She watched the response board light. She watched the duty harbourmaster, a young man who had recited the role in the Promise's schoolroom at age 9 like everyone else, open the channel and speak the answer that 30 years of training and one old woman's rulebook had prepared for exactly this moment. She heard the whole deck stand up as he said it. This is Earth approach. We have your position. Hold, friend, the school is coming. The Homework and her sister ships made the retrieval. The first human-born cord edge in history, black hulls and one lantern, brought the old ship in, the whole long way to berth at high anchorage beside the Promise, where the 2 rolls touch. Nor had lived to see it done. She died the following spring. At her own instruction, her stone stands not in any place of honor but at the memorial grounds gate, the harbourmaster's post, facing the sea, carrying the line she chose for herself from a manifest she once read at 3 in the morning alone, when the whole thing began. Voyage complete, log closed. All are home, all were carried. The school is open. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. A new one leaves Earth every day.